Hello everyone. Today I'm just playing with kind of one of my favorite techniques. It's just a glazing and values. Values just means how saturated your paint is that you're using. And so what I wanted to do is just show you some really cute little daisies. They're kind of my favorite that you can paint, and just adding some darker values can really make it so easy and so fun. I'm going to start with, actually, I always start with kind of the center of my flower here. So here is the center there, and I'm drawing that a little bit darker than I normally would. You've seen me use this technique. It's so fun. Let's switch over here to my paint. I'll actually use this one. And by the way, I have two containers of water, a clean container and a rinse container, or a wash container and a rinse container. And I'm starting with a pretty light value, meaning this is about 80% pigment and 20% water. And you can see it's really movable, quite watery. And that's what I want for my first layer. And this is just such a beautiful thing I love about watercolors, is that glazing. So I've got my circle, and I'm just going to point, widen my brush a bit, and come around. So I've got my first little petal. What I do is I tend to do my top, bottom, and right and left. So top, bottom, just using the tip to kind of form that out. Point of my brush, open it a bit, and do the other side, just like that. So already we have a cute little daisy to be. Point, press, and I'll use the tip of my brush a lot of times to kind of form out the edges. I'm picking up some more paint, tap, 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 point, press, use that tip of the brush, point, press, to kind of fill in, and point, press, little swirl, fill it in. Actually, just kind of going back in there. And the other thing is too, is watercolors will really lighten up as they dry. So point, press, just simple little daisy there. And then I'm going to move on to another one. We'll come back to that. I think actually before, well, we'll wait. I'm going to add in some dark, maybe a blue in the middle. But let's go ahead and grab some pink. By the way, I've got 140-pound cold pressed paper here. And this is the My Lang palette. It's by Paul Rubens. And I'm going to, that is their rose red, which I love. And then let's draw our circle in the middle. I'm going to make this one a bit bigger. So light value again, point, press, and a little bit bigger just for some fun contrast. This rose pink is pretty saturating, by the way, and you can see how it moves around really easily. Tap, 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 point, press, point, press, point, press to get that width, and point, press up here. So some of these I kind of draw in, and I think I'll make that one just a little bit bigger. And some, ooh, that's too bright. See that? That's too bright. I want it more light. I'm gonna make this just a little bit bigger so it just matches the height of the one next to it. Point, press, point, press. So I'm kind of drawing the two approaches. I could kind of draw it with the tip of my brush, point, press, or I could do two C curves. And then let's throw an orange one in there. So this is just my cad orange, which, be careful, it can be a little saturated, can kind of take over your painting. And I want that a little bit lighter. There we go. Actually pick up that yellow orange. And let's do one right here, point, press. I'm not even drawing my circle on here. Point, press. I'm winging it, guys. Just never know what I might get when I wing it. point press. So here I did 2 C strokes, point press. So when you're putting more pressure, you're opening up that belly of your brush, and you get that wider brush stroke. Point press, point press. See that how the belly kind of widened up? A little bit of that orange. Point press, like that. Point press. And again, I always use the center of my brush to kind of shape out that, using that tip. So I've got all these fun daisies here, and look at how light they are. We're gonna add in more, but this is what I wanted to show you. I think I'll actually just take a quick pause here, and let's just, this is a heat gun. Love my heat guns. They're maybe $15. I'll share the link below. And I'm just going to give this dry a bit. There we go. That's all it takes. It's pretty warm here, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the first one we did here, and I'm going to use a little darker, a little bit more saturated color. So I've got the pink here, the pinky red, and I'm going in with a darker value, meaning there's more pigment in here to water. So it's going to have a darker shade. Now, so easy, you guys. I'm going to add in a few with that darker shade. Point press, point press, and up on the point again. Just like that, 2 C strokes, and look at how easy is that, right? Now let's go to the pink one here. Let's see, let me get my rose pink. So I had a little puddle here, but I'm making it a little more saturated. So now that's about 80% paint, 20% water. And I'll go in, and same thing, I'm just adding them in between. You could even do shorter ones. So maybe some little baby petals in there. Point press like that. And one more up here. Let's see. Go in right there. So look at that variety of values. I'm actually going to go in and create a couple more small ones. Since I went small, I can add more. And maybe they look like they're a little bit in the center. Just like that. Isn't that cute? And so easy. How about if we even go in here and add some pink? That might be fun. I love pink and red together. Point press, point press, point press. Pick up some more paint. Tap, tap, tap. Just have fun with your colors. See what you can create. But look at that depth, right? Because these are lighter value. They kind of fade into the background. And actually, before those dry too much, I think I'm going to go in the center with a brown here. This is like a Van Dyke brown. If you're using, like me, the Meeden palette. And make sure you don't go in with just the tip. Kind of go in on the side. So you don't want too much water there. Tap, tap, tap. And just barely dot in, light pressure using the tip of your brush right to the center. And look how that spreads so nicely. This is where watercolors will just do the work for you. Isn't that fun? And then let's go into this one, and I'm going to use a darker value orange. So I've got that here in my palette. And this is pretty dry. I let that layer dry. And then I've got my orange paint, and let's go in here, point press. I think I want that even darker. Let me grab a little bit more orange here. In my palette, there we go. Point press, point press, point press for these petals, so fun. Oop, now that one had a little too much water for my taste. go. And just filling that in. Isn't that fun? Such an easy way to paint. Let's create some leaves in there. I know leaves are always kind of difficult for everybody. So I've got some green. This is tree green or sap green, depending which manufacturer you're using. And I want to start with a lighter value again. So you can see here, it's very movable, pretty watery. And let's just go in and add in some leaves. Point press and a C stroke. And then another one on the other side. And I'm leaving that little bit of white in the center just to look like the vein. Let's do another one over here. Point press, like that. Maybe some of the little stems in there. And you can glaze over your flowers. You don't have to be perfect there. Maybe one here, point press. So I'm opening up that brush. And if you want a little character, just make one side a little bit longer. Something like that. I'm gonna pick up a little bit more of that paint. So we've got kind of this pinwheel thing. I think I'll add another little flower over here. How about one small one here? Point press, just almost little dabs there. Isn't that fun? There we go. And maybe dotting in while that's wet. I've got some olive green here. Just dabbing in some interesting dark colors here. Like that. And then let's add a couple small daisies over here. Oh, and I didn't add in that brown, but I'm going to let that dry just a bit first. Let's see. We'll maybe add in how about a small daisy up here? So I'll grab that paint because I'm starting first with that light color. And be careful, cad yellow can be a little intense. And maybe we just make it sticking out. So I'll create that little circle here. And then I'll bring the petals out. So point, press, point, press, point, press. Now this one's hidden a bit. So is this one. So I'll just use the tip of my brush to paint those in. And point press, just keep going. And that's pretty much it. I'm just gonna let that one peek out there. And I'll wait for that to dry. Maybe we could do, let's see, where could we add in an orange one or another reddish color one? Let's do that down here. So I want to lighten that up and we'll create our little circle there just for guidelines. You want the base of your flowers all pointing towards the center. Point press, using the tip to kind of clean that up a bit. Point press, and then use the tip, get a little bit more. Point press, and this one I will basically use the tip of my brush since I need to kind of go around that little flower. Let's keep going here. Tap, tap, tap. You don't want too much water on your brush. This one here. Point press. Point press, and I'm just kind of going up to that leaf and then I stop. I feel like we could almost use a yellow one here. So let's go into that color. And how about right here? So let me turn my paper, it's a little bit easier. Point press, press, just peeking out here, just like that. And maybe a pink one here. So I'm trying to kind of share the colors all around. So pick up some paint, tap, 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 always starting with the lighter color, and point press, use the tip of my brush, keep going, point press, maybe a tiny bit more of that. Point press, and I'm not worried about it. I have some orange in here. Actually, this one, just go over that other petal. That's fine. You can do that. There we go. So we have another little flower there. And we'll go into, let's see if that's dry. I'll just give it a quick shot here, guys. Okay, and now I'll go into the center with a really dark brown. This might even be a little bit darker brown. I actually like Van Dyke brown for this when I'm doing centers, and maybe just a little of the Mars black. And let's go in the center here and just dot in. There we go. I think I'll even add some more here. Almost like an anemone feel when it's in a circle like that. And we'll go in here. There we go. And we're going to add those darker value petals here too. There we go. I love that. So simple. All right, let's add some darker petals to this one. So maybe even a little bit of orange would be pretty. Move my palette over a little bit. By the way, this is the Meaden palette I love. Point press, point press. Okay, I want that to be a bit darker. So I'm gonna grab a darker value, meaning probably 80% pigment and 20% water. Point press, point press, point press, like that. Isn't that fun? And then maybe on this one, we go in for that darker value of red, but I don't want too much pigment in there. I mean, too much water in there. So tap, 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 point press, point press. We could even go a little bit darker than that. So maybe like scarlet. Point press, there we go. Ooh, yeah, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? And I'm just going in between my other petals. Almost like little pinwheels here. And look at all the fun interest, so easy. So all of these have this feeling of depth. And then the last one here is that pink. So I'll grab some of that rose pink. Look how vibrant that is. And let's go into this one. Point press. There we go. Just a tiny bit of water. I want that pretty thick. Point press, point press. And again, I'm just going in between the other petals here. Now the fun thing that just happened, in case you didn't notice, is that black I put in the middle is kind of spreading into the petals. So fun, right? So what a fun little composition. Let's give it some stems here. Tap, tap, tap. There we go. Like that. So cute, so springtimey, isn't it? And we can do maybe some, I feel like I need a leaf over here. There we go. leaving that little vein in the center there. Again, just wiggling my brush around using the tip. There we go. And then we'll do a couple down here. I want to bring down because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 little stems. There we go. And I think I'm about done. This is such a great exercise in just those brush strokes, point press, and also playing with values. So starting with your lighter value and then your darker value and just making it fun. If you want to add a little something to this, you could always splatter like that. And it just adds a bit of a background, which is always kind of fun. There you go. All right, everybody. So just to go over that brush stroke, it's just a point and a press, using the point and a press on your, I'll show you here. So holding your brush about 2 o'clock, point, press, point, press, opening that belly. And you get this wonderful little petal stroke. Point, press, point, point, press, point, and lift up. So practice that brush stroke, point, press. We use it a lot for all kinds of things. We use it for our stems, our leaves, our petals like this. Point, press, and back up again. This is a very inexpensive paper I'm showing you here. So there you go. Have fun, play, just progress, no perfection. And I think this would be such an adorable little card for somebody. All right, everybody, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for being here with me.